Hey guys, what is up? This is Philbo, and we are looking at the Ogre Plague Arrow build in Undecember. This build is going to utilize Ogre Arrow and Plague Spike. Ogre Arrow is a poison arrow build that fires multiple projectiles at the enemy and pierces through them and tracks them. So Ogre Arrow will bounce around from enemy to enemy since it tracks them, acting a lot like the chain rune. However, it's almost like chain on steroids, because when we're dealing with one target, it will pierce that target, and since it tracks it, it will turn around and hit that target over and over and over again for as many pierces as we have. So we will be looking to increase our pierce count as much as we possibly can to get massive damage. And then we will be triggering to Plague Spike, which is going to give us really good clear. We will be looking to attach the parallel multi-shot and chain runes to this to increase the amount of Plague Spike projectiles we have. And then the chain rune will allow those projectiles to bounce from enemy to enemy. On top of that, Plague Spike is going to have a chance to reduce the enemy's element resistance by 10%, making this a fantastic complementary skill to Ogre Arrow. Also, another thing I want to point out before we jump into the details of this build is that I have plenty of other build guides available, and if you'd like to explore and check out some other guides, I have a playlist for that, and I will drop a link to that in the description. Okay, enough of the overview. Let's go ahead and jump into the details of the build. So Ogre Arrow is going to fire a projectile that pierces and tracks the enemy. What this looks like is as Ogre Arrow hits an enemy, it will pierce through them and bounce from one enemy to the next. And like we said earlier, if it's just one enemy, it will hit that target over and over again for as many pierces as we have. So what that's going to actually look like is something like this. You shoot the Ogre Arrow and it is going to bounce back and forth. I have 4 pierces right now, so it is going to hit the target 4 times, and you can count it out 1, 2, 3, 4. So as many pierces as you have is how many times you're going to hit the enemy. We can get this pierce count up much higher with specific link runes. Ogre Arrow also gets a 10% base speed amplification, very fast attacking right out of the gates. We're going to get 1 pierce count by default with Ogre Arrow. It's going to come with 3 projectiles. Note that this projectile count cannot be increased with multi-shot or through the Zodiac tree. So by default, we have 3 projectiles that will fly out. Each of those is going to pierce the enemy back and forth for as many pierces as you have. One thing to note is that we will have damage dampening of 20% when we hit the same target repeatedly. So as the target gets hit with the additional projectiles, it is going to do a little bit less damage, but we still want to aim to get as many hits on the enemy as possible by increasing our pierce count. And then for awakenings, the absolute best one to get is going to be 1 projectile count. Since we can't increase this with multi-shot or through the Zodiac tree, this is going to boost our damage significantly. This will bring our projectile count up to 4 instead of 3 and be an overall massive increase for us. Moving on, we are going to look at Plague Spike. The projectile will hit the enemy and explode upon hit. The explosion upon hit is Burst Plague. By default, it only shoots 1 thorn. It does initial damage, and then Burst Plague is going to hit the target again. On Burst Plague, there's a 25% that we can get Plague. Plague is going to reduce the enemy's element resistance by 10%. And for awakenings, the overall best awakening, in my opinion, is going to be element damage amplification. This gives us a very large increase to our element damage. However, we will not be able to use the element damage amplification link room. No big deal though, we have plenty of other options. Probably wouldn't even use this anyway, because the best in slot link runes does not even include element damage amplification. For our attack enhance, we will absolutely be going with Marksman. Marksman is going to give us hit rate increase, projectile damage amplification, and also a +1 to the pierce count. Remember that Ogre Arrow does additional hits per additional pierce. So increasing our pierce count is going to be another major damage boost to our Ogre Arrow. So we definitely want this. One thing to note about this +1 pierce count is that with Plague Spike, we will be linking Chain. Chain causes our Plague Spike projectile to bounce from one enemy to another. The +1 pierce will not allow Chain to happen until the pierce, instead of it chaining on the first enemy it hits, it will pierce through, hit the second enemy if there's another enemy behind the initial enemy, and then it will start chaining. So it does have like a weird interaction with the chain rune, but Marksman is still the best attack enhance for this build. For our defense enhance, we will be using Siphon Life to get a big HP absorb on hit. For the duration, this acts like Life Leech and gives us a lot of health back. For our movement abilities, we are going to be using Roll. Roll is a fantastic movement skill. It has 2 max use count by default and has a very, very low cooldown compared to other movement skills. And then optionally here, I think having another movement skill with Trick Shot is also really fantastic as we get to move around the maps much, much quicker. This will reduce your farm times. For our attack enhance, we will be going with the Seal of Critical Chance. This is going to give us a big boost to our crit chance. The other option that you would have would be Seal of Condensed Elements, which gives us a big boost to our element damage. So go ahead and grab that if you are at crit cap or very close to it. Finally, we will be using Illusion Arrow. Illusion Arrow is going to fire a projectile automatically upon using a projectile skill 5 times. So every 5 times we cast our Ogre Arrow, an Illusion Arrow projectile will come out. So you'll see these projectiles kind of shoot out, and we're going to use this to build up our energies for whatever energy you want. I'll explain that a little bit here when we look at the link runes. Do note that this is going to give us a fairly large resource cost amplification, and if you are struggling to maintain mana with this on, then I wouldn't run Illusion Arrow, but do note that we have it. One more skill that I want to talk about very quickly that you could work into this build is Poison Area. When we lay it down, is going to affect an area, and anybody within that area is going to take additional poison damage. Since both of our skills, Ogre Arrow and Plague Spike, are poison based, it will increase the damage that you deal with those abilities. So this is kind of like a miniature attack enhance in that it's going to give us a nice boost to our damage. So if you do decide to use Poison Area in the build, I think one of the best things that you can do is use the spell activation on hit rune. This is a rare synthesis rune. The reason you're going to want to use this is because it gives the skill rune cooldown a huge dampening. Poison Area has a fairly high cooldown, but when you attach it and trigger it from another ability, it drops the cooldown big time. So you can use anything to trigger this. I've got Illusion Hook on here. Illusion Hook is always a good one to trigger from because it does add this movement and speed dampening here. And then you can also get this inflict pain effect, which adds basically 15% damage with the 50% pain effect. So this is always a good one to trigger from. However, it is based on cast speed, so it's not going to cast very quickly since this is a build that utilizes attack speed. So you could swap this out for some other bow ability if you want to get Poison Area out there quickly. But basically what happens is when you attack with Illusion Hook, it's going to activate the Poison Area, or when you attack from any other skill. Additionally, you can add the time acceleration rune here and drop the cooldown even further to Poison Area. But what this looks like is we're going to cast our Illusion Hook since it activates, and it will create that poison area. And then after the cooldown is up, anytime you use Illusion Hook again, it is going to cast Poison Area once again. Since we will be adding Illusion Arrow to this build, let's go ahead and talk real quickly about how it's going to generate energies for us. So we are going to attach the Extract Energy rune to Illusion Arrow. Extract Energy is going to give us a chance to gain an energy that matches the main element on hit. Now, Illusion Arrow is the physical element by default. If we don't convert it to any other element, it is going to build up physical elements, decreasing damage by 3% per stack, but we're going to want to change that most of the time to another element. And the two that I like a lot are convert to fire damage, because converting to fire damage is going to allow us to build up fire energies, giving us damage percent per stack. By default, you can get up to 5 energies without raising the fixed max. So we can get 150% additional damage, which I think is really good for mapping. However, I think the better option is to convert to lightning and add the continuous shock rune. This is going to give us shock rate, and it's going to allow us to shock. Shock is going to increase damage taken to enemies by 20%. Additionally, we can add extract energy here anyway. Getting lightning energy is going to increase status effect rate by +6 per stack. And the more status effect rate we have, the more likely we are to inflict shocks. Another good rune to add on to Illusion Arrows, since Illusion Arrow does increase resource cost amplification, is going to be the Dampen Resource Cost, which lowers the resource cost. So right now I'm at 19.2% with these 2 runes added. If I add the Dampen Resource on here, it brings it down to 14.7. Really nice resource cost decrease right there from this one rune. this rune can be acquired from guild shop runes. Now, if you don't know how to get runes or if energies are confusing to you, I have a guide on each of those, how to get all runes, and an energy guide that goes into detail on the specifics of energy. Links to those videos in the description. All right, so the first link we are going to use is quick attack. Quick attack is going to add big attack speed boost. Remember that Ogre Arrow has a base speed amplification by default of 10%, so it's already fast, so you will eventually replace quick attack. Once you do replace quick attack, one of the best options to replace it for is going to be confidence. So you're going to get much less attack speed from confidence than you will from quick attack, but you also get damage. This is provided that you have 80% or more HP, but you should have over 80% HP most of the time that you are mapping. The next link rune that we're going to get is Deadly Poison, and we need to make sure it is awakened to Verity. So the reason we want to awaken this rune to Verity is that it cannot apply Venom by default. So this is no big deal in this build because neither one of our skills apply Venom. However, in order to get the damage amplification and then the damage multiplier, we need to be doing damage against enemies that are affected by Venom. When we awaken to Verity, it gives us this Venom rate right here and can inflict Venom. It's going to add a percentage of the base damage as a dot. This is also going to stack. That is another good reason why you might want to convert the illusion arrow we talked about earlier to lightning, because the extract energy rune does increase status effect rate, which will increase the rate at which we can apply Venom. Moving on, a good placeholder rune is going to be element damage amplification, just to give us a boost in element damage amp. But at some point, you're going to want to remove that and put something like Pierce Wound in, because Pierce Wound is going to give us an extra Pierce count once we awaken it to Verity. Do not use Pierce Wound until it gets awakened to Verity though, because remember, the Pierce count is what we're going for in this build. We want to increase the Pierce count as much as possible so that our Ogre Arrow can bounce back and forth over and over again the more pierces we do. So the whole point of Pierce Wound is for that, but do note that Pierce Wound is going to give us additional damage per pierce per hit. So the damage increases the more it starts piercing. You also get damage amplification. And then it also has a chance to inflict penetration, which dampens armor by 2% up to a certain amount of stacks. That won't be helpful for this build. We're just after this rune primarily for that additional pierce count. So eventually you will get Pierce Wound. Make sure it's awakened to Verity. And then we will also be getting the piercing rune. This is the most important rune for Ogre Arrow. You have this +3 pierce count once it goes to legendary. We're also going to get projectile damage, projectile amplification, and then every additional pierce we have is going to give us a multiplier on this damage amplification here. We have 1 pierce on Ogre Arrow. We will eventually get 4 pierces through piercing. So if we look at this, you'll see we can get this +1 pierce count and up to 70% projectile damage. So we'll get 4 pierces from piercing, and then we'll get the additional pierce from Pierce Wound once we awaken that. So we will get a 6 times multiplier on this number right here, which will give us a massive damage amplification. I also think that the Poison Penetration rune is really, really good on this build. And some other options here would be Find Weakness. Find Weakness if you're low on crit rate. This will be a good option. And then if your mana can handle it, Mana Storm is also a really good option. We will then be activating on hit to Plague Spike. Plague Spike is going to use the Strike rune, giving us a big strike damage amplification, speed dampening, but it doesn't matter because we are activating to this skill, so this attack speed dampening has no effect on us. We will also be using concentrated area damage. This does dampen the area of effect on our Plague Burst. However, we get a really large damage amplification here, and it is totally worth it. And then since Plague Spike's primary purpose in this build is to help us clear, we will be using Parallel Multi-Shot to increase the projectiles by an additional 4 projectiles. Once we go to the legendary, we get this +2. And then also Chain. So this is another rune I would invest in early on with Plague Spike, as it's going to allow our projectiles to bounce from one enemy to the other, helping us to clear multiple enemies much, much quicker. So this is kind of what that looks like as we fire. Our Plague Spike is going to hit enemies and bounce all around in there. So this is why we're using the Parallel Multi-Shot and Chain together. The combination of Chain and Parallel Multi-Shot is just so good, and in my opinion is the best way to run Plague Spike in this build. And then again, we talked about Deadly Poison. Make sure that you get this awakened to Verity before using it on Plague Spike to get this Venom rate. If you aren't using this, some other good options would be, again, element damage amplification is really good here. Also poison penetration, again, find weakness and mana storm are also great. Find weakness if you have low crit. For our stats, what we will be getting is enough dexterity to run Ogre Arrow, enough intelligence to run Plague Spike, enough strength to get you up to 200. Now, the reason we want the 200 is because here in Maggot, we will be able to pick up this 40% damage if strength, dex, and int is 200 or more. However, if you're struggling to get to 200 strength, don't worry about it. You don't need to put anything into strength. I would say that having some strength is nice, as strength does boost your HP and armor percent here. And I just think that having armor is too good to pass up. I think you should at least be getting some hybrid armor gear in this build, whether it be armor barrier gear or armor dodge gear. Now let's go ahead and walk real quickly through the Zodiac traits. You don't have to follow this exactly. This is more or less just to give you some ideas on how you might want to allocate your Zodiac traits. Trait 1, I'm grabbing all these points. This build is based upon attack, so we will be getting damage upon attack and attack speed. Trait 2, I'm grabbing all these points here. I'm boosting armor. Again, I think armor is extremely important. Armor reduces physical damage taken. So getting our armor closer to armor cap is a very good thing in this game. Tree 3, I'm grabbing these first 3 points in gem. And then I'm grabbing a few points here for mana. However, if you don't need it, drop it and maybe put some extra points here. You get some damage and maybe some HP. Tree 4, I'm grabbing damage upon attack. I'm grabbing the armor node here. And then get the resist you need the most. Tree 5, I grab these 3 points here. I like the damage taken decrease. And then I'm grabbing these first 3 points here to get this attack speed. Tree 6, I'm grabbing all these points here to get this attack speed and this attack crit damage. Tree 7, I'm going into Maggot. I'm getting this 40% damage node if your strength is 200 or more. Also, I'm getting this projectile damage node here and then the extra stats. If you don't need the intelligence, you just put it into dexterity instead. But this is going to affect both of our skills since they are both projectile-based abilities. Again, I'm grabbing 3 points here just for mana potion effectiveness. If mana's not an issue, drop these and put these elsewhere. In Scent, I'm taking all these points here. I like the damage decrease from elites. If you don't take a whole lot of damage, you can drop these, but I do run these. And then I also like getting all these points here for the damage on crit and then damage on miss. Rarely ever miss, then just drop these 2 points and potentially even all 4 of these points here if you don't have barrier gear. In Tree 8, we are going to be going with Plague and getting all these points here. I also grab these 5 points for HP and Farmer. And then in Hunter, I'm grabbing all these points here to get Time of the Hunt for damage amp. I also like Detect Prey, extra crit rate, extra move speed chance. And then I'm also coming down here to get some additional damage and some HP. For our specialization, we will be going with Brilliance. You're going to be grabbing Overpower, getting a nice flat damage increase here, and then Element Penetration. We're also going to be grabbing this Strike Damage Amplification and Acceleration. Acceleration gives us attack speed and movement speed gains. If you're having major issues with mana, then grab Convert Mana. This will take some of your life and convert it to mana. Now, I will say, if you do take Convert Mana, make sure you have some HP Absorb in your build. You can get HP Absorb on your weapon or in your Lacrima if it has a slot for weapon. Those are some good spots to get HP Absorb, but I would definitely recommend that. If you don't have any HP Absorb, what I would recommend is to drop these 2 points and grab these 2 right here and get this resource cost dampening, and then just try and invest in some things that will give you some mana efficiency, like some of those Zodiac traits we talked about earlier, and then try and get some mana regen or mana potion effectiveness in your gear. Like mana potion effectiveness, you can get mana potion cooldown or mana potion effect on your belt. That's a really, really nice spot to get it. The other place is in Mastery under Alchemy. You're going to want to put some points here in Tree 2, this mana potion cooldown recovery speed, and then Tree 3, this mana potion effect. These 2 right here will give you a nice boost to your mana. So definitely make sure you're leveling up your alchemy and grab these 2 right here. The second specialization, we will be going down here to get this damage amplification. Knowledge is not going to help us out too much, as cast speed doesn't help us out in this build since it is an attack speed based build. However, the damage upon spell will at least give our plague spike more damage. We're also going to be picking up sharpness here. And then again, the spell crit rate, spell crit damage is only going to help out plague spike. But I will say this 15% element damage amplification is really strong for a second specialization. It's totally worth it to go into this specialization for this node right here. In our third tree, we will be going up, grabbing this element damage amplification. We will be going down here and grabbing damage amplification against enemies affected by dot. You want to grab this if you have deadly poison, awakened severity, and it's applying the venom. So the venom is going to be the dot in this build. So if you're grabbing that, make sure you have deadly poison. Now, I will say this, even if deadly poison is not awakened, you will still have a chance to apply venom with this status effect rate that you get, this +2 right here. This will give you like a 1% chance in and of itself to apply venom. So you'll still have a chance to get that dot. Just having Verity makes it much more consistent. Again, if you are running energy absorb on illusion arrow and you are converting to lightning, it also has a chance to increase your status effect rate as your lightning energies go up, and that will give you a chance to apply the dot as well. So this is all is not lost here. You still have a chance to get this. It just becomes much more consistent when you have deadly poison, awakened severity. We will also be taking this damage amp against debuffed enemies and the additional lightning damage equal to 10% of damage on hit. Now this 10% right here, it doesn't matter that we don't do lightning damage. It's going to apply 10% damage as lightning anyway. And since we're doing lightning damage, we will have a small chance to shock the enemy, giving us that 20% boost from here. But again, if you want the more consistent shocks, the route to go is illusion arrows converted to lightning. And then this 5% damage amplification, the two debuffs that we have in the build that we can get are shock, whether it be from the additional lightning damage here or from illusion arrows if it is converted to lightning energy. And then also we have a chance with our status effect rate to apply blind since we are a poison based build. And blind is just going to reduce the enemy's hit rate. So this is also a nice defensive option. Finally, for gear stats, charm blessings, and relic information, all of that is going to be down in the video description. But that is the Ogre Plague Arrow build. What do you guys think? Do y'all like the build? How can we improve it? Drop me that information down in the comments. And if I've missed something or if you're still confused, drop that in the comments as well, and I'll get back to you. If you've enjoyed the video or it's been helpful at all, do me a solid and give me a like and a subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I've got to get back to the grind though, so I will catch you guys later.